Hey, this is David Rosengarten. You're listening to Shawn Rosler on the Coarse Grind Podcast.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. This is episode number 62 of the Coarse Grind Podcast. With you as always, host, creator Shawn Rosler. How is everyone doing this fine evening? You know, those of you who visit the show with a relative frequency know that one of my favorite feeding grounds for guests on the show of a phenomenal nature is Bravo's Top Chef. Few shows show up with such regularity in the incredible talent department. And what makes it all the better is honestly the majority of their chef testants, guests, and personas and so on are beyond approachable, if not downright friendly. From 4 years ago to now, this much has rung true. In 62 episodes, God's honest truth. But before that, before the podcast, before this show, when I was but a mere Top Chef fan, a tweet regarding my son's post-bath hair and its similarity to a certain chef testant's hair garnered a reply from him and made a massive fan of me. Perhaps most recognizable as the winner of Bravo's Top Chef All-Stars, tonight's guest is a successful chef, restaurateur, cookbook author, and television personality. After graduating from the Culinary Institute of America, he went on to train at the French Laundry, Danielle Chez Panny, and El Bulli. No big deal, right? He's appeared on Top Chef All-Stars, Iron Chef America, and Chopped All-Stars as a competitor, and the first ever Top Chef All-Star, I might add. He's a recurring judge on Top Chef, Master Chef, and has also judged episodes of Guy's Grocery Games, Cutthroat Kitchen, and Cooks vs. Cons. Our guest has particularly enjoyed his hosting duties for the shows Burger Lab, Cook Your Ass Off, and Food Network's Halloween Baking Championship. He currently owns and operates Trailblaze, a forward-thinking culinary company that has consulted on, designed, and operated popular eateries, including multiple outposts of Flip Burger Boutique, located in the Southeast, and most recently, Crack Shack and Juniper and Ivy in Southern California. He resides with his wife Jasmine and their two daughters Riley and Embry. When not behind the stove, he may be found training for his next marathon, working on his next cookbook, or cheering on his favorite English Premier League football team, Arsenal. But we, on the Manchester United side of things, won't hold that against him, rivaling some of my earliest Top Chef standout memories. It's an honor to have him here tonight. What's more, to recognize, and I never thought I'd be able to say this, that we have something in common, culinary podcasting. With a show starving for attention, but enough gushing, let's let the man himself tell us more all about it. Ladies and gentlemen, and everyone in between, my guest this evening, Top Chef contestant, judge, and all-star restaurateur, host, and the voice behind Starving for Attention, the Chef Richard Blais. Chef, how are we doing this evening, sir?
Oh my goodness, Shawn! That introduction is so formal. I think I need to sort of like consolidate some of it. It should be just guy with the weird haircut. He roots for a horrible British soccer team, and you might have seen him on a TV show, but you don't know which one it was. I think that we can just make that happen.
I will leave that version of it to you, and I know for certain, I have to call back to this, it was circa 2009 or 10 or so. I had just gotten up on Twitter, but my now 10-year-old, who was 3, had this raging hair going straight up, and I tweeted it, and no lie, you were on a flight back to Atlanta, and you referenced it, and you told me he was more handsome than you, but I thought, you know, even back then, how cool, how approachable, and to have you here on the show tonight is nothing short of an honor, to be honest. So thank you for finding the time.
Well, thank you, and I apologize. Hopefully I didn't influence your son's hairstyle past his 3s and 4s.
Well, we can talk about that.
It is the look. It is the look of a nice, it's a European soccer style haircut. So
it is a strong look. The only problem is that I'm lacking the hair these days to actually pull it off, so I'm a bit jealous. I'm not going to lie.
It's understandable. It's understandable.
I got you. So, folks new to the program, folks with terrible short-term memories like myself, starters, mains, afters, starters. We're going to talk to the chef guest about where they come from, mains, where they're at, and afters. A little bit off the cuff, a little bit irreverent, but no one's been injured in 61 episodes. So, without further ado, Chef Richard Blais, tell me about where and what you grew up eating.
Wow. I mean, it's not a very grand story, nor is it romantic. But I mean, my sort of, I grew up in the dawn of convenience and packaged foods, and my mother was not a great cook, and we ate a lot of packaged foods from the freezer or microwave or cans, and that's the truth. A lot of chefs have these great romantic stories about cooking omelets, in Lyon, France, standing on an apple crate when they were 3 or 4 years old, and that really just wasn't my story. So I mean, I truly didn't really even know probably that vegetables came from the ground until much later in my life, and when I started apprenticing and cooking and working on farms. But the beginning roots were really, really humble. Even once I started getting paid to cook, if you can call it that. My first job was at a tiny little restaurant. I don't know, maybe you've heard of it. I'm not quite sure. McDonald's.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, at McDonald's. And at McDonald's, I had like a very prestigious position there. I was the poissonnier, which means fish cook in French. And at a fast food hamburger restaurant that arguably serves one seafood item, it is a very important position.
Yes.
And the first batch of fillet of fish that I sent out, I forgot to put the top buns on those fish sandwiches. So I was being avant-garde and ahead of my time.
You were already deconstructing at that point.
Yes, well before I knew that would be my calling. But I do really, I love telling those stories because I think it's so important. Now that I have employees and so many people, watching me cook or listening to me talk about food. That you don't have to start from a tremendous place, and you don't need generations of cooks and chefs or luxury behind you to fall in love with our industry.
No, absolutely not. And I think that's one of the biggest things. I mean, I come from the e-learning field. We're obviously not necessarily in line there, but like if you can ever convey those humble roots to where you're at now, I think that does nothing but serve to pull people in versus push them away.
Oh, I hope so. I mean, we do a good fare at pushing people away, I'm sure, as well, accidentally. But yeah, that's the truth. So it's an authentic story.
Right on. So looking back, I know you're extremely humble about the roots, about it being frozen convenience and so on. But are there any foods that you can hearken back to really kind of evoke a sense of your childhood? Is there like one dish or one dinner or something that stands out as almost reminiscent of that age?
Yeah, sure. I mean, there were, again, now that I'm a chef, of course, I look back and there are things that, I remember from my childhood that were, much more than just, a box of, Salisbury steak from the freezer. One, because I grew up on New York, in a coastal area. I remember being at like this little dockside, clam bar with my parents and eating just some stuffed clams. And just being like, just kind of blown away, like probably most kids when they first encounter, like, a stuffed half of a rock, basically, is what a clam looks like. And I remember thinking that was so crazy, but those flavors, the salinity of the ocean, dried oregano and breadcrumbs and, a nice dousing of lemon juice, that is one of probably the first, like, true food memories that still, shows up in my food today. Even when I talk about McDonald's, of course, I'm like mentioning the fillet of fish because these sort of seafood and coastal flavors are things that I grew up with and I remember quite clearly. And then I, once I get past the fact that maybe my mom wasn't a great cook, even though she did her best and, she got food on the table for us. My grandmothers were both really great cooks. And I think a lot of chefs sort of have that story, or a lot of people just have that story. And, on one side I had a, French grandmother who was really sort of, Julia Child, and making like fresh gelatin, stuffing full birds and just really doing luxurious stuff. And I had an English-Irish grandmother on the other side who was just fork mashing potatoes with salt and butter. And those are some big influence that I didn't know it at the time. It took me probably, even 10 years into my formal training to realize, what great cooks my grandmothers were.
Yeah. So if you had to pick, and you can certainly say both, like was there one true standout that really pushed you in the culinary direction? Would you say one versus the other, or is it absolutely 50-50 both?
We're talking talking about a dish now or a grandmother?
Just in general, culinary influence on you, having those two behind you. And I mean, was it somebody else that really kind of opened your eyes to it?
I'll be honest with you. I don't think it was for me. It wasn't the food that really propelled me into the industry. It was the camaraderie of working in a kitchen. So, like a lot of misguided youth, I thought I was going to be a professional athlete, or like just because I wanted to, because I loved baseball, I was going to be a professional baseball player. And really, kitchens have the same sort of structure as really great teams.
Sure.
So when I fell in love with cooking and kitchens and professional cooking, it was really because it was the next team sport for me, and I just felt like a family, and it just gave me a lot of things that I wasn't getting in other parts of my life. But it was probably more the team aspect of it, the physicality of it, the camaraderie of it that really got me into the industry, and not the food itself.
That's huge, and for as long, and I know we were talking before that we started recording about how long I've been doing the show. That's the first time I've heard it referred to as that, and I kind of want to go back to that. Cooking as the next team sport. I mean, certainly we've reality'd it, we've competitived it, but that's really a smart way to think about it. Obviously considering the source, of course it is, but it really is a sport in that it is a complete and utter team effort, is it not?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, of course, now that I'm on the other side and, trying to create and, produce television shows and host them and judge them, there's a lot of commonalities. That's why it works really well on television, except in restaurants, there's truly no concrete score, at the end of a service, but it has all the other workings of a sport. It has a sort of set clock. The restaurant opens at 5. Everything has to be ready by that time, and then there's a 4-hour service, and there's kind of a halftime in the middle of a restaurant service. So it has all of these elements that really are the structure of sport. With the only thing lacking really is win or lose. At the end of a restaurant service, I mean you win when everyone's happy, but there's no scoreboard for it. So I think that's what reality television and any of these cooking shows that do a good job sort of provide is, now, cooks have a final score, if you will. But the team aspect of it is something that is just like, it's something that you don't see on a lot of cooking shows because it's usually one-on-one or it's a small group of teams, not larger teams. But yeah, there's a lot of similarities.
That's phenomenal. That totally changed my perspective, at least a little bit, on things like that. So, I mean, looking at it as a team sport, and obviously you know it to be that now. When was the moment, if there is just one that you can isolate, that you realized that this sport, quote unquote, was going to be what you devoted your life to? Was there a moment?
I just want to clarify that. So do you mean just the sport of cooking, or are we actually talking about cooking competitively on television? Because I could probably, answer both for you.
I'll tell you what. Yeah, let's go ahead and roll with both. I love A and B, so go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think the first one's easy. When did I decide I was going to be a professional chef and dedicate myself to this sort of team sport of cooking professionally? As soon as I as soon as I didn't feel like I was heading to work, in the morning and or coming back from work after a, 80-hour work week or something like that, which was pretty early on. I think anything that you do, for those hours, if you don't feel like it's work, then you're doing the right thing. So it was really just, early on, the first year, the fact that I would do that and then come home from working in a restaurant and just dive into books. I would, I'm old, so I would, collect, VCR tapes and watch old Julia Childs. Like I was full blast 22 hours a day, food all of the time. And I would say that the same thing sort of happened once I got on television and then realized that, no, wow, this is actually now going further back in my, sort of childhood. Now I'm combining the fact that I actually played all of these sports as a kid. I love sports, and now I'm on television. And, for people who know my story, I cooked on Iron Chef and, then cooked on Top Chef. And my first run of Top Chef, I'm standing there as the runner-up, and at the end, when I didn't win, I really wasn't upset. Of course, I was disappointed that I didn't win, but I was really upset that there was no game the next day. And I think that's when I realized that the cooking on TV and competition and creating these environments for cooks was really special, because that was just a great feeling, to sort of be upset that, like, oh man, there's no game tomorrow. This is the worst. That's when I realized, wow, this TV stuff is also a lot of fun. I'm learning, and there's a sport involved in this as well.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I mean, certainly you've not only gotten your head around it, but you've come back with a vengeance in All Stars, obviously, and now all this other great success that you've had. You've got to look at that and be amazed. It's not coming from a sort of PR perspective, but I don't look at my own work as an amazement or even with a sense of, wow, we've made it, or I'm successful. Yeah.
I don't, I'm on the podcast with you, so that's I've made it. We've gotten to this point.
Isolating that sound clip in 3, 2, 1. Okay.
There you go. But I think that's kind of the other key is, you just have to keep pushing and working hard, and you have to have that love of the game. But it's certainly been a fun ride, and I've learned a lot. Even just here, quite honestly, my lesson from this podcast is you telling that story about that tweet, because one of the things that happens when you gain this popularity is this sense of responsibility that you have to then that you have to have that sense of responsibility, because I don't know you, I'm tweeting with you, and we're having this interaction, and I have a responsibility to be a good person, quite honestly, and that's something that's that part of it's been amazing, because I think it's helped me become a better person.
And that right there, I have to step back and isolate, and we're going off format, and I love it.
That's all right.
No, because this is so true. Again, being at it for 4 years, and I know Starving 4 has been up and running for about what, 9 months.
Starving is we're 12 or 13 episodes.
12 or 13 episodes.
We've been at it for a few months.
Yeah. Yeah, and so, in my time, and even in that first 8-9 months, one of the coolest things for me as a fan, as a part-timer, as a past-timer, in the kitchen, was that everybody from Top Chef who I've touched base with has been really cool. Granted, in their own way, but just wonderfully genuine, and I think it only raises the culinary celebrity status higher as opposed to other arenas, because I think you have to be real. Like you said, you have to keep plugging away, or it stops. There's no benefit in to put it frankly, being a dick.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I didn't know if I could say.
Oh yeah. We're not FCC. We're not hot shit here.
The next 20 minutes will be amazing. No, I think you're right. I think we all understand that it's a lottery ticket of sorts. You have a responsibility, and if we weren't in the right time or place, we would be where 99.5% of our industry is. So it's really important for us. I'm speaking on behalf of all of our our cast over the years.
Sure.
To make sure that we are trying to represent ourselves as not only just celebrity, but real talent and genuine people.
Absolutely. So let's talk about Chef Richard Blais here in the now. When you're cooking, when you're creating menus, dishes, and so on and so forth, where do you pull from? Is there one place? Are there many places?
Yeah, it's going to sound like a very abstract answer, but it's really just all depends, and it's incredibly fluid. It certainly is a time and place thing. If we're doing, like right now, I'm trying to develop a menu for a pop-up that we're going to do in Chicago in the middle of December. I really have to, almost like an actor, try and put myself in the middle of Chicago in December, even though I have to write a menu, 3 months out.
Sure.
So that's one way. I think it's really important for, chefs and cooks to cook with some sort of sense of theme or locality. So, not just in relation to ingredients, but also just to sort of, create sort of a nice sense of authorship with their food. So it really comes from anywhere. So I mean, certainly the product drives it a lot. For me, other industries, drive it a lot. I mean, I might, be in a makeup store with my wife and be inspired by a makeup brush or a perfume bottle or something industrial, or I might be, talking with one of my friends who happens to be a surgeon. I'm in her office and she has all of these medical tools and equipment. So, I mean, for me, it's really opening up the receptors to receive that inspiration and not really looking for it, but realizing that it's all around you every single day, whether you're at a ballpark or in a kid's playground, or even, of course, at the grocery store.
Sure, and super cool benefit to note to those of you unfamiliar with the amazing chef Richard Blais. He has this wonderful skill set of molecular gastronomy in his back pocket, which makes all of that even more possible. One of the greatest surprises I ever had, actually, was a couple years ago turning on Science and seeing you there. I'm like, what? How did that happen? And glued I was.
Yeah. Listen, I mean, the molecular, it's interesting because I'm in a moment right now where, molecular gastronomy, which is, the science of deliciousness, which is the best way to sort of say it to someone who's not familiar with it. It's kind of been dead, for a couple of years now. And it easily is, it could be said that that's what sort of got me to the platform that I'm on now. But it's cold. It's really tough marketing. The food sometimes can be too artistic or scientific or even precise. It's got a knock for not being enjoyable, but being just interesting.
Sure.
But I am in a moment where I'm sort of feeling like I'm going to turn it back on and do something that's, really sort of out of the box. And this is kind of a world premiere here, revealed to you.
Woo!
Because again, there aren't too many people really doing that anymore. And I feel like I've learned so much over the last 5 or 6 years since I've toned it down myself over, simple foods and, simple ingredients and getting back to the basics. But I'm feeling like it's time to turn it on, Shawn. I don't know. I think it's, you might see circa Richard Blais' original Top Chef style inspiration coming back soon.
You heard it here, people. September 10th, 8:55 Eastern. You heard it here.
Episode 62.
We broke the story, damn it.
I love episode 62, by the way. That's such a great number. Like, I'm into sports, and that's a great, like a young baseball pitcher's number, or even you're a Manchester United fan. So, like, some 16-year-old, striker that comes off the bench, late in the season.
I want you to know I planned it that way. I swear to God. I'm not lying
to you.
There you go. So, take your career. You have all these great creations. I mean, first and foremost, you're a dad. I'm a dad. Let's identify that as our greatest creation. But, you have all these wonderful creations that you've done. Cookbooks, So Good, Being a Hugie, your podcast, Starving for Attention, and so on. But dish-wise, concept-wise, can you talk to me about what you feel your greatest creation has been?
Wow, I mean, I don't want to feel like I'm running you around with these really vague answers. As far as dishes, I think that would be, almost impossible for me to say that there's one dish. I think restaurants sort of can, grab a dish or two and they can become signatures. And maybe I'm just not good enough. I think there is an older generation of chefs who could say things like, my, linguine with lobster and caviar is the ultimate dish. And I think that's Mark Pierre White, who I'm a big fan
yes.
of, old school Mark Pierre White, had in his book White Heat, has mentioned something like, yeah, this dish is as close as perfect as it can get. I just don't think that way. I guess my question really would be, can food really be perfect? Like, this is weird because I'm a chef, but I'm kind of over that. The, orgasmic, experience of one dish, or the, the ratatouille moments. And,
yes.
I don't know. Maybe it's because I've just never had one of those moments, either as a diner or really as a cook. I have a much more sort of practical, maybe blue-collar sort of approach to how I view food, even though my food might look really fancy.
Mm-hmm.
At the end of the day, it's just food, which is another Marco Pierre White quote, and I think sometimes it's important to also realize that. I think as chefs we can get so incredibly silly with, some of the things we do, and although I am a chef that runs around with tweezers in my pocket, that's also hilarious. And
Yes.
I think that is that's kind of where I'm at right now in my career. It's like I'm sitting on that fence and capable of, looking at one side and saying, wow, that's amazing, that's art, that craft has just been, practiced for 10,000 hours, and at the other side, just be like, wow, that's ridiculous. This guy is making, charcoal potato soil, and I bet it doesn't taste that good, and it sounds horrible,
Yep.
So that's where I'm at.
No, I hear you, and that's got to be a wonderful place to be, comfortable yet still driven. I think that's
yeah, but you also, sorry to jump in. I mean, you also had mentioned, our greatest accomplishments is being our children. I will tell you that that is the one thing that, had pushed me to, I think, really sort of be comfortable with my food is having kids, because they just become the ultimate audience. They, when you cook for a young kid, they don't care about presentation or reputation or, or the history of France or a quote from Marco Pierre White or your tweezers.
Yep. They just care how it tastes. Is it good?
Yeah, they just care how it tastes. And in my first book, Try This at Home, which was a James Beard nominated book, I just have to throw that out there.
Absolutely.
And also, when anyone tells you their thing was nominated, it means they didn't win. So it wasn't like they did one. But I've learned so much through my kids. One, that again, it's just food. It's not that important. At the end of the day, it is nutrition and sustenance. And also, wow, a 6-year-old, a 5-year-old, a 4-year-old kid just cares about tasty and delicious, and they can teach you a lot of lessons about salt and sugar and all of these things that the human body craves and needs.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sorry to go deep for you. I hope
dude.
I
I absolutely adore it, and honestly, this is where I was hoping I would go with Richard Blais, and I couldn't have imagined an answer that wonderfully profound. I love it to death.
You're kind of getting like Richard Blais 60 Minutes, because it's a late Sunday, although I don't know when you air, but it's like 6 p.m. on the West Coast for me, and like we're just kind of winding our day down. So I feel like I'm in the 60 Minutes chair with you. We got the blue plate special. It's going to be time for Wapner. So you've got the pop-up in Chicago. You've got all the success in cookbooks. You've got the podcast and everything. What else is next for Richard Blais? What's the 5-year? Wow, this is, again, you're catching me at a good time, because I said this earlier in this conversation that I don't really feel that I've done anything that has sort of been the benchmark, moment, legacy moment of my career. It's been really, my business has been juggling all of those things that you just said for the last, 7 or 8 years of opening up restaurants and starting, concepts and trying to do books and television shows and all of that. And that is truly what I do. But I'm really trying to gear up towards, that legacy moment, and maybe it will be one of the restaurants, or, creating a television show, which I have a couple that are, being, pitched about right now.
Excellent.
But, it's also, I've been really, invested in a little bit financially and also just mentally in sort of the tech sector and, all of these companies and new businesses that have changed the world. And, I'm going through this moment where, I feel like, wow, I'm smart enough and have the resources to try and do something that could be really, really big. And my 5-year plan would be, to make that happen in the next 5 years. Although I couldn't tell you at the moment what that idea is.
Well, I certainly hope when that time comes that my show is around. I hope your show is around, and we can do a show about that very thing. So we will.
Well, you'll be around. You're 62 episodes in.
62, so, man. I'm married to it at this point.
I'm still trying to get people to subscribe. So, go on to Apple Podcasts, Starving for Attention. It's free.
It's
everyone.
free.
And hit that button. And, how many times have I also... what I do love about the podcast is that it is one of the few things that is truly just mine, and, like, we do it more as a passion project. And but, like, how important it is to get subscribers and to get fans for that thing that is yours.
I hear you.
And I'm here. My mother-in-law is in the house with me right now, and I'm like, hey, have you downloaded the podcast? on your iPad and also on your phone. Like, I just like going after everyone in my immediate circle.
Laying it on
to make sure that they're listening.
No, I've done the same thing, and I'll apologize on air to people for 4 years. I've been doing the same thing. The 50th episode, we actually did a live show from a local theater, and we raised money for the hungry, so that was cool.
Oh my gosh! Well, next time you're doing a live show, give me a holler.
I'll certainly do that. I will certainly do that.
Right.
Let's take a jump into the afters real quick, and I will certainly let you go, sir. I am standing in your kitchen, professionally or at home. You pick. What music do I hear?
Wow. You're standing in my kitchen at home today, live, and there's some Yo-Yo Ma playing in the background.
Nice.
And that could happen from time to time, but specifically because my kids are thinking about embarking the cello route.
Oh, very good.
But if you're in my kitchen tomorrow when my kids are off to school, and then maybe it's some 90s, mid-90s New York East Coast hip-hop.
Love it.
And I think that really just speaks to really my food style and just my style in general is, we are incredibly diverse with the foods that we like, the music we listen to, the people we like to hang out with. And I think that sort of helps build a richer, more fulfilling kitchen and world.
I love it. I love it. And I have to sidebar there because my 25th episode was Elon Hall. I saw that you had Elon on. And I have to tell you, speaking of mid-90s hip-hop, literally he's driving his kid to school. I have him on the call, and I hear DMX in the background. I'm like, this is not even real life right now. What is going on?
No. Well, then you also know his kid is young enough that he can still play DMX in a car with his young child. So,
this is true. This is very true. All right. Next question in the afters. You're to be stranded on a deserted island, and you're only allowed to take 3 foods or food type items with you. What would they be and why?
Oh my gosh, too complicated for me. 3 foods and food type islands. 3 foods and what? What is it?
Or food type items. Beverages,
right.
That kind of thing. Doesn't matter.
All right. Well, wow. I guess we'll bring a male and a female. We'll bring some pigs. Right.
Pigs.
We should do that.
All right.
Is that a good answer?
That's one. That'll work.
So hopefully we will then have meat, right? And
yep.
then what's the other item? I think just so I can get to the point of survival, a food-like item. I'm going to bring one of those a water filter.
I love it.
So I can survive to actually get a day to cook those pigs. Yeah, that'll be what I do right there.
You would survive. I answered beer, bourbon, and beef, and my wife is like, "You're gonna die of colon cancer." I'm like, "All right, fair enough."
Yeah,
apparently, I'm not good at this game.
Yeah, you'll starve probably before, I would think. But probably not the best answer, Shawn.
Chances are good. I'm sorry. I apologize.
You'd have fun though. It'd be a great couple weeks.
That's what I'm saying. It'd be good to go. I am going to go on the assumption that you've heard of Melanie Denea and My Last Supper before.
I've heard, yeah. I've done it. I believe I've done interviews with her, yeah.
Oh, fantastic. Okay, so part of the inspiration for the podcast, however many years ago, was Melanie Denea's My Last Supper and The Next Course. The Next Course, of course, has Marco Pierre White on the cover holding a round of bread in front of his face. And the format for the book is a coffee table book with, questions to 50 famous chefs, all centered around your last meal. And I kind of spoiler alerted it off your site today, but I ask you, Chef Richard Blais, what would your last supper be?
Oh, wow. The answer, though, could change. Again, there's some sort of circumstance that could be involved. Like, is this a last meal because we're in a sort of post-apocalyptic sort of situation? Some of that it depends. But I think the answer is going to be, if there's other people around with that meal, it's going to be sort of spaghetti and meatballs,
nice.
Pasta bolognese,
nice.
with family and friends in a very sort of casual New York Italian sort of way.
Nice.
If it's just me and I'm lonely and this is like, right before I'm beheaded, or something like that, then it's probably a triple bacon cheeseburger of some sort.
I love it. Oh, I love it. It's so north and south. It's like, oh, that's comfortable. Oh, that's frightening.
Ooh, that's dark. That's very dark, yes.
Little bit. And Chef Richard Blais, last question, the simplest and yet the most complex. What is food to you in one single word?
It's fun. I mean, not just food, but I think just that, it all boils down to that one word. If you're having fun while you're doing it, eating it, whatever that thing is that you're into, if you're having fun, you're doing the right thing.
Damn straight. I'm literally, 30 minutes into this. I'm looking at the clock. I realize I just asked Chef Richard Blais the last question, and I still kind of can't get over it. So, Chef Richard Blais, thank you, man. Thank you so much for being on the show.
No worries. Listen, I don't know how many times you bring back repeat guests, but certainly if you're going to do something live, let me know, and let's do it again. It was a lot of fun.
I would adore the opportunity. Again, folks, if you're looking for Chef Richard Blais, and let's be honest, why would you not be? Amazon.com. Try this at home, and so good. 2 wonderful reads. Podcasts. Be sure to subscribe. If you didn't hear him here tonight, his mother-in-law apparently just subscribed to it on her iPad. Starving for attention. In the iTunes store. RichardBlais.net. And again, Chef, I can't thank you enough.
No worries. Thanks, brother. We'll see you soon.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, this has been episode number 62 of the Coarse Grind Podcast. With me again this evening, the wonderful Chef Richard Blais. My producer is the Reverend Johnny Lamoria, Johnny Leland Robinson. Be sure to check him out at Steampunk Honesdale. The next episode, number 63. Stay tuned.